Chapter 6 is kind of a long one, so we'll try to scoot through it as fast as we can, although there's a lot of pertinent information in it that you need to be aware of, so please make sure that you study it. Notice that the first bullet point in this slide talks about when sports became organized for children in the 1920s. Notice it says they sponsored teams and sports leagues for boys. There was nothing for girls in the 1920s. It was simply for boys. It was Little League Baseball primarily, and secondarily Pop Warner football, and that was about it for boys, but there was nothing available for the female persuasion. But of course, nothing can go smoothly even at the youth sport level. And a perfect example of this is the 2001 situation of Danny Almonte, whose father falsely certified his birth certificate so that he could play Little League Baseball, which was at that time capped at about 12 years old. And he played it at about 14 or 15 years old and dominated, got his team deep into the Little League World Series. Because adults can't stay out of the way, youth sports will always have problems. And here's a little more information on Danny Almonte. While I love this book, occasionally we'll run upon something in it that I don't completely agree with, and something's kind of hinted at here that I don't really agree with. Notice in the second bullet point it says, yet the actions of some parents indicate a willingness to do whatever it takes to get and keep their children on the best teams. Now, I've always said that youth sports should be for kids to have fun, but to me, losing, especially getting beat badly, is not a tremendous amount of fun. So you should try to be as competitive as you possibly can be. I've always believed that you play sports to learn, but you also play to win, and there's nothing more fun than winning, even if it just provides you with bragging rights over your friends. So as a result, while the book takes a negative view of people wanting their children to win, I don't. I think that's kind of the point. While I'm not going to go slide by slide through this, I think this is an important breakdown throughout this chapter where it's broken down by youth sports and then interscholastic, which would be middle school, high school sports, and then intercollegiate sports, and then we'll get into some professional, maybe some Olympic stuff. But I think that most of you, when you get out of college, your jobs will probably be in the middle school to high school range. So it's important that you familiarize yourself with these things and the problems that can arise in them. So make sure that you go through this pretty thoroughly when you're passing through chapter 6. And then we get into intercollegiate sport, and I think this is really interesting in the second bullet point where it says that before sports were organized on the collegiate level, many colleges recruited non-students, townspeople, alumni, and students from other college and even pro athletes to play on their teams. people run down the NCAA, and Lord knows the NCAA has its problems. And for us at UPike, we are an NAIA school, and we see problems on that level. But it is far greater now than it was back in the early days of intercollegiate sport. The farther we go along in our sports world, and because the internet has made us truly a global society, it's important that we know what's going on in international sport. I think that most of you will probably say that you follow a team or a sport league that is not United States based. And I think it's important that we know what's going on around the globe in our sport. And then if you're a fan of the NBA, Major League Baseball, those two sports in particular, the NHL, even, there's a tremendous amount of talent coming from outside the United States into these pro sports leagues. So we need to be aware of what's going on globally. Here's a very good question for you. Do colleges and universities exist to provide education or entertainment? As we get into the Olympic model, you'll see the references to Baron Pierre de Coubertin. Of course, he was the person who organized the first group that would become the International Olympic Committee, or the IOC, and what his views of Olympic sport should be. He was the guy who got the group together, and they're the ones who started the Olympic movement back in 1896. And here we see a reference to issues in Soviet and Eastern Bloc countries. If you'll study the German countries and the former Soviet Union, and even what's going on in Russia today, this is not something that's happened in the past and has been forgotten about. In the 2018 Winter Olympics, the Russians were banned from playing, and that's why there was a group called the Olympic Athletes from Russia. They were the ones who could, so to say, prove that they were clean performance enhancing drugs, although even some of them got busted as testing progressed in the Olympic Games.